first setup, the practice is going to want to go down to the admin ban here and then to product activation. And you're going to scan down a little bit, and it's going to be your patient check-in, QR scanner, and kiosk. This is where you're going to want to go ahead and activate. This is set up right now, so we already have it activated, but we can click setup here. The first thing that's going to come up would be a read and accept terms and conditions. You're going to want to go ahead, read through that, accept everything, and then click activate. Once that happens, there's going to be some prompts that you're going to have to complete. Then over here on the right side, you're going to be given a URL for your iPad and an activation code. This activation code is big because that's when you start getting the iPad set up, you're going to need that activation code to be able to get through everything. So once you have this all set up, your kiosk check-in and all that, we can go check out the settings, and you can customize your iPad. So if we go to the Hilo over here and then kiosk settings, this is going to be your settings area. And I'm not going to go crazy in here, but I want to show you just a few of the things. The first is your enable providers. So basically you can go ahead and select what facility you want this to be at. So we'll just choose Missouri Medical Consultant here. And then all your providers are going to be over here. If you want to enable them, you would select it and choose the right arrow. So these are only going to be your enabled providers, the ones that will be getting the charge for using kiosk. Everyone else that's not enabled will not be charged a fee. Again, a little bit down further is your enable resources. This as well, you can go ahead and select if you wanted any resource. So for a resource check-in as well, you could do it down here. The next one is your kiosk settings. So this is the big area where you can kind of customize everything and make it exactly how you want it to look when patients are checking in. But again, you'll go ahead and select your facility and go through some of the pretty important features in here and some of the things that I think are pretty cool. This first one, you can have when you're going to allow the patient to check in. So if you want them to check in, allow them to be able to check in 30 minutes before their appointment, they can do that. You can change this to, we're not going to have it until 10 minutes. They can't check in until 10 minutes before their appointment. So you can schedule that, and it won't, when they go to the kiosk, it's not going to let them check in until that time frame. You can also do it for after the appointment. So let's say the appointment's supposed to already been started. You can set up how many minutes you want them to be able to check in after it, the start time or the end time. If it's the end time, however long that appointment is scheduled, they can have that many minutes to check in after the end time of that appointment. You have enable multiple same-day appointment check-in. So if they did have multiple appointments, they would be able to check in twice, or who knows, sometimes 3 times. Some of the other settings here, you have authentication type. So you can choose when a patient first logs in, how they're going to authenticate. So you can have a keyboard input authentication, or if you had a credit card swipe machine, you could do that. If you have that set up, you could choose that option as well. This next one, assign staff to receive demographic updates. So when we turn on that demographic updates, and I'll let them, it's a different setting at the bottom there, but when we let them do that, we can assign a staff member for that to go to. And then they can go ahead, look at it, and verify everything. Consent forms, if we want to do any consent forms, we can choose that. And we can also choose if we have, just an accept or decline button on that consent form, or if we wanted them to do a digital signature. So you're going to have both of those options as well. If you wanted to turn on an appointment creation, you can do that. A lot of practices don't want, it would be good for a walk-in clinic. A lot of practices don't want someone to come in there and actually create an appointment right there, but that is definitely an option. Allow patients to validate demographics. So if they're already a patient, they can come in there. Once they check in, their demographics are going to show up. They can go ahead and either validate it or edit it if there's any changes on it as well, which is the next one, update demographics. And what we talked about before, the web-enabled patients, this allows just right from the kiosk. So, the front desk doesn't have to do it. It's going to go ahead and go put with the email address, automatically web-enable the patient. And then there's also a pre-check-in message, which I'll show over on this right-hand side here. You have 3 separate messages over here. You have a welcome message text, which you can type in, and then a message to be displayed on successful check-in. So you can customize this to what your practice wants. So after the patient checks in and it says you're all good to go, you can have this message pop up as well. And then another welcome message description. So this is just an example, if you're a new patient, please see the front desk prior to check-in. So you can customize this to basically what your practice wants. Now, your e-payment settings, I know we're having some issues with TSYS and all that with going in. I know there's a bug with it all right now, but these are what you would need to turn on for all of that. And then your authentication types down here. So when we selected which one we wanted, so let's say we're just going to do the keyboard entry. You can choose if you just want a phone and date of birth, or if you want first name, last name, and date of birth. If you have a driver's license scan, you can have that set up, or a QR code, which is fairly new. You can have that as well. These are just some, other options that you can choose. A big one I like here is the enable primary pharmacy edit. So if you can select your pharmacy, but if you wanted a different one, you can be able to edit it right there. And again, this is just saving so much time for the front desk as well. The next one is your appointment bookings. So you can allow a creation. So a lot of people don't want to allow providers to book anything, but you can allow creation for a resource as well for an appointment. This all is just up to what the client wants, but these are all the different options that you can have as well. I'm not going to go through everything, but your insurance, this is great. You can have your validate insurance button. If you do have an insurance scanner that you can get with it, you can enable that as well. And you can also select if make the insurance scan mandatory if you do have that scan there. So they would have to put their card on there. And then again, these insurance scan documents, you can assign them to a staff member to review and then import. You can also have the patients, if they can select their primary care provider. If it's different, they can update it. You can also do that with your referring provider and rendering provider. I haven't seen this used too much, to be quite honest, but that option is there for them to choose that. The next one is your patient history. So you can turn these on. You can do any of the history, surgical, hospitalization history, allergy history, immunization history, and these are going to be almost free text on the, it'll give you like a reason and then kind of a date of when it was. If you do have the immunization history selected, you will have to select the form to go with it. So that's one thing. And here's where, so this is really cool with the document management. So if there's a consent form, a questionnaire, an insurance, and driver's license, we can go ahead and put what document folder that's going to go into. So if you wanted your consent form to go into patient documents, we could select that there. When that consent form is signed, it's going to go right into that patient's documents. And again, you can do that with questionnaire, insurance, and a driver's license as well. If they scan that in, you can go into choose which folder you want that to go into. Your insurance, your eligibility check, you can have that turned on as well. and you can verify for primary, secondary, tertiary, or other as well. You have your existing and walk-in appointments, so you can set those up both differently. Now, there are some alerts you can set up, so if something doesn't go through, you can set up, there was an issue while validating the insurance, please go to the front desk for further assistance. And these are also some more alerts down here. If they're in a collection status, it basically will stop the check-in for the patient and make them please go to the front desk to continue your process. So kind of a cool thing, won't let them go through. So then if the front desk did need to talk to that patient, it's going to prompt them to go up there. So those are the main big settings. A few of the other things here, your consent form, this is where you would go. You're going to go ahead and select which facility, and this is where you could put all your consent forms in here that you want to be on there, and have the patient sign. Your appointment settings here, again, select the facility. So if you do have a walk-in, you can, if you're a walk-in clinic or whatever, you can have appointments be booked at a default visit type. However, if you allow patients to select the types for walk-in, you can go ahead and choose which types you want them to be able to, which visit types you would like them to be able to select when they are checking in. So if you only want it to maybe select the new patient visit type or a follow-up, you can just choose those two, and those are going to be the only options to create the appointment for that. Next, your questionnaire settings. Again, select your facility. These are where you can go link these visit types that you had to a certain questionnaire. So if you wanted, just a regular office visit, you could have this questionnaire pop up. So that's basically just linking your questionnaires to a visit type. We already did enable resources. Now there are some logs here. You have your kiosk usage logs. Basically, this is just going to go through, it's going to see user ID, username, login time, logout time, and then activity. So what happened on that kiosk? So this is going to go through everything that happened in there, who did it, and the times. Another thing, though, you can select is this failure usage log. It's basically going to, if anything failed on it, it's going to have the patient's information, and then it's going to give the reason here why it failed. So just something to go, practices can go just look and see if anything wasn't going through and why it didn't go through, if something needs to be fixed or anything. A few other ones. This is basically just the registration key management is saying all the iPads that you have registered. And if you want it to not have it anymore, you could just go ahead and disable that right from here. So this is just going to list all your iPads you have. You have your activation code and your registration key. Your activation code is all going to be the same because that was from the setup, but your registration key will be different. A few other ones. Your pre-check-in message. This basically is, once you select, yes, I'm going to check in, you can have a message pop up to that patient. Again, just customizing whatever the client wants there. Demographic settings, this is pretty big. Let me select a facility here. Basically, this is, so this first tab is new patient demographics, and then you have existing patient demographics. So you can select which new patient comes in, what fields they need to select. And then you can also choose which ones you want to make mandatory. So that's a pretty good thing to making them fill out certain things. And an existing patient, you can do the exact same thing. So that's really it for the settings there. I want to jump back into my PowerPoint here and just kind of go through, it's pretty difficult to actually have the iPad show up, but so we got some screenshots just to kind of take you through what, kind of the start of it, what the office would have to do right away, and then also, would say an established patient's coming in, what they would have to do, or if a new patient's coming in, and just show the kind of the screenshots of everything. But activating kiosks, the first thing you're going to have to do is go to the, the iPad App Store and download the kiosk app. Once you get that, you're gonna have to enter in your kiosk practice ID, and that's that activation key that we talked about earlier when we went to enable it. A few things here. If you host your own application, then there's a gear at the top right up here where you can go ahead and enter your URL. If you are hosted by PSM, then a ticket will need to be submitted to obtain the URL. So that's just something that might arise. So once it all gets set up, the first time, right when you go in at the beginning of the day to log in, the practice will enter in their login credentials, just right here. So these are all going to be what these are screenshots of the actual iPad, what it's going to look like in the beginning. So then once this happens, they're ready to go. Self check-in from kiosk, touch to begin, ready to go. Okay, so then the patient can click that, and then here's that pre-check-in message. So this will automatically pop up first if you did that pre-check-in message. Please read carefully. You can customize this to say whatever they want. Once they read that, the patient will go down to the bottom and continue the check-in. Next, and again, a lot of this stuff is I'm showing kind of a client that would have everything set up. So not all of this has to be set up, obviously, but next would be your authentication type. So if you have all these set up and want to give the patient options, you can have this. So they can go ahead and choose if they want to verify themselves with a driver's license, a credit card. Again, you have to have these scanners, or account number. If they have the Helo app, the QR scan in. So these are all options that the patient's going to have. We're going to just show if it was first name, last name, and date of birth. If you did have if it said, you could prompt it to say, do you have your driver's license with you at this time? If you don't, you can say no, and it'll take you to a different verification process. If you do, you can say yes, and then that scan will go ahead. But just for this verification, you can do first name, last name, and date of birth. Pretty simple. So it can go and search for you right there at the bottom right. All you do is press continue. And if you are an established patient, an existing patient, it's going to pop up your demographics. And again, from the settings we turned on, you can go ahead and verify these demographics. If everything is fine, you can scroll down, look at everything, and then press continue. If it's not, if you want to change something, the patient can go ahead in there and edit it. And if the cool thing is, when we assigned this to a staff member in the settings, so if they do go and edit something, it's going to go down to that, the T jelly bean of that staff member, and they can go in there, open it up just like this. It'll say updated insurance. You can look at what they updated, and you can select this import button right there, and it'll import into their demographics. So it's a pretty cool. It's going to save time from phone calls and all that. So the next would be your insurance validation that would pop up. Let's say you are an existing patient, but you didn't have any insurance. You're going to get this prompt. You can go ahead and add your insurance. Now, if the practice did have an insurance card, this is what's going to, or a scanner, this is what's going to pop up. Basically, patient's going to take out their insurance card, set it right there facing up, and initiate the scan. Now, and it's going to read it and populate it right there. This is also what's going to show up if you already had your insurance in there. So you can, the patient can go in and validate this. If it is not correct, you can select no and then update that. So the patient can go ahead and update that. As it is fine, you go through, it looks good, you can click yes and then move on. The next, and again, this is if they have everything turned on. So it would be, you can do your primary pharmacy details. So let's say you didn't have one in there, you would get this prompt. Would you like to set your primary pharmacy? Obviously you can select no if you don't want to, but you could go ahead and select yes. And then basically this screen's going to pop up. You can search by zip code, you can search by city, And then it's gonna give you a big list of things, and you're gonna go ahead, scroll through that, and then select which pharmacy you want. And once you select it, you'll get this, and it's gonna say, are you sure you want to set your primary pharmacy? If this is what you wanted, you can select yes, and that's automatically gonna put into your demographics as your pharmacy, which is a very nice thing to have. So the next, we're going to have our questionnaires, our histories, and all that good stuff that I think saves the front desk a ton of time. But this is basically just showing this practice has set up a social history, review of system, and a family history questionnaire. So if this pops up, you can go ahead and just click start and just start going through that questionnaire. Now, I just did one kind of an example of how it works. So this would be a social history. This would just be one question on it, but it would pop up like this. And so your marital status, are you married, widowed, divorced, or you don't want to answer? All you do is press the select button for which one you want and then go to continue. The next question would come up. So it's pretty easy to do. Also, if let's say you're coming, this is an appointment or 2 weeks later or whatever, you've already filled out the questionnaires. So this is kind of what it would look like. It's here's 4 questionnaires that you've had completed. Well, you can go in if something has changed, like social history or something's changed, you can go in and click the review button and edit that questionnaire. So that's it's not set in stone. You can go ahead and edit that the next time you come in. This is kind of what surgical history would look like. Just as an example, would you like to add a new surgical history? You don't have to. You can just click continue if you don't want to, or you can do add new surgical history. And basically, this is a free text. What's the name of it and the date, and it's just going to capture that information for you. So nothing too crazy there. The consent forms. This stuff is great. So you can have multiple consent forms on here. It's basically forcing the patient to go read it and then sign it. And again, this one is set up for the sign with your finger, just right on the iPad. You can also do an accept or decline button from the setups. And the cool thing is once they sign that, like I said, we could pick which folder we wanted that to go into, and it's just going to go, that consent form is going to go right into that patient's documents, which is a nice thing to have. So once they're done with all of that, it's going to give them, okay, this is your today's appointment, what time it's at, and then so basically the patient's done. They can go ahead and click check in. So they are checking in, and they're going to get this message that we set up. You have successfully completed your check-in. Please be seated, and someone will be with you shortly. And then they'll just go ahead and log out, and it'll be ready for the next patient to use. So then really quick here, just let's say it's a walk-in, it's a new patient that hasn't been there before. You can go ahead and this is all if it's set up to do this, if you want to allow this to happen. But you could go in and fill in your first name, last name, and date of birth, and then you're going to select this new patient down here. Now, this new patient registration is what we set up in that settings for demographics. So what we have shown here is what we said to show, but with the red asterisks, these are the ones we said were mandatory. So it's going to make this new patient fill this information out before they can even click the continue button. So once they fill all that out, it'll go in, and obviously this was a walk-in, so and we are letting them schedule a new patient. So you're going to get this prompt, and you can go ahead and make a new appointment. And here's the visit types that we set up in the settings. So you can choose which visit types you want to show up here. So if we're just doing a walk-ins for annual visit, we can select this, then the patient will choose which one it is. And then also you can go ahead and enter the reason. This would be the patient entering in the reason, I'm sick, or just free texting what the problem is. And then also what we set up on, it will be, you can choose which appointment you want for the day, which time slot you want, and you can go ahead and book it. And basically it'll say, here's your appointment, here's the time you scheduled your appointment, reason, what the status is now, type of visit, and then by what we set up earlier in the settings, it's you're early for today's appointment. Please check in 10 minutes before your scheduled appointment time, because we had set up that it won't let you check in until 10 minutes. If you had 30 minutes, it's gonna say that as well. But yeah, that's really, and then they'll basically log out there and go have a seat, and that's basically it for the kiosk. Thanks everyone for joining. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.